Welcome to Mill Hill East Church,
a community where everyone can experience the love of Jesus.
A family where we explore the love of Jesus together.
A church which expresses the love of Christ.
You're welcome here.
Today's story is an eyewitness account of some confusing evidence found in the Gospel of John. I don't know if you're someone who likes true crime podcasts or series on Netflix. If you're someone who likes solving puzzles or researching and discovering truth. Or maybe you're just someone who likes to read about unlikely stories on social media or in the news. Today's enigma for us to investigate is this. The body of Jesus is gone, possibly taken, and all that are left are some strips of cloth.
Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb.
So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him."
So Peter and the other disciples started for the tomb.
Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first.
Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb.
He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in.
As well as the burial cloth that had been around Jesus' head, the cloth was folded up by itself, separate from the linen.
Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed.
For until then they still hadn't understood the scriptures that said Jesus must rise from the dead.
Then the disciples went back to their homes.
The first witness is Mary Magdalene. During this time, she couldn't stand as a witness in court because she was not a man. Yet, in the four Gospels, she is named and features far more often than most of Jesus' 12 male disciples. And in Luke's Gospel, we're told that Mary and some other women are the ones who finance and resource Jesus' ministry. She comes to find the tomb of Jesus open and empty and goes to tell some of the others. Next, we see two disciples running, and one is faster than the other. This is probably John, who wrote this gospel. He's the youngest disciple, a teenager when these events happen, and he's racing against Peter, who was the oldest disciple. He gets to the tomb first, and he sees expensive strips of linen covered in perfume and spices. John knows about wealth. During the trial of Jesus, we learn that he is known by the high priest and his court, so he comes from a well-to-do family. Why would someone take the body of Jesus and leave the most expensive part? This wasn't done by grave robbers looking for profit. And if someone wanted to make sure that people stopped following Jesus, why would they go to the trouble of peeling off the cloth covering his battered and broken body before they took it away? The first one who steps into this empty tomb, this cave cut in the rock side of a garden, is Peter, a fisherman, an uneducated man, a man not known to the high priest because of his low status, someone impulsive and uncouth. As he walks in, he sees the headcloth folded and placed to one side. This is different from the resurrection of Lazarus earlier in this gospel. In that story, Jesus calls Lazarus to come out of the grave, and he comes out hand and feet wrapped, head still covered in grave cloth. But whatever happened here in this grave wasn't the result of someone calling a body out or carrying it away or even executing a plot. This man was raised to life only by the power of God. So here we have three witnesses. One who reminds us of our common humanity, the inclusion and diversity of those who come to Jesus. One with proximity to power, a young boy perhaps coming from wealth or at least a well-known family. And one who was prominent in the early church, a reliable witness, but still someone uneducated and unlikely. And what do they witness? They witness that the resurrection wasn't just Jesus' spiritual body or his soul walking away from his physical body. That the resurrection wasn't a hallucination or imagined event. They witness that the strips of linen and the face cloth remained in place. That his physical body had been transformed and taken out of this place. Throughout the eyewitness stories of Jesus' passion that we tell each other at Easter, we hear the phrase again and again, this happened in accordance with the scriptures. That is, so much of what happened and of what Jesus said was in fulfillment of God's promises and the climax of God's story. And yet, there's an obvious chance here in these stories for a more direct fulfillment. Jesus clearly says again and again and again, after 3 days I will rise. And yet the Gospels don't use that phrase. They don't write that these disciples came to an empty tomb after 3 days. They say, on the first day of the week, this happened. That is, something new began. They look to the future rather than to the fulfillment. This is a new era. This is a new creation. This is a new start. Everything is changed from this point onwards. And here we are as disciples with strips of cloth, speaking of what has happened. I wonder what the strips of cloth represent for you. What leftovers, coverings or ties are in your hands? Do they represent the sins that Jesus carried to the cross, the violence that held him there, or the anger that can misshape our lives? Do they remind us of the grief of losing a friend or a family member, the losses in life that scar and hurt us? Do they show us the places where someone has hurt us, an enemy has plotted against us, and unforgiveness has boxed in our heart? Perhaps they remind us of the way life hasn't been full of opportunity, but it's been full of difficulty, of being tied up by debt, by family history, by the prejudice of being a woman, being too young, too old, too tied to where your family is from, or weakened from your background and origin. The strips remind us that Jesus took all of that to the cross, to forgive our mistakes, to cancel our debts, to fight our enemy, to suffer our sickness, to die our death. And he was raised to life to see us through to the other side, to turn our sorrow and sadness into joy and hope, to reshape our pain into peace, to rename our hurts and scars as ways to experience grace. The body is missing. The trauma of the cross replaced with the confusion of what happens next. But we have these strips that tell us something new, something creative, something unexpected has begun here. Perhaps this year has hurt you in ways that you don't think you'll ever recover from. Perhaps life has been heavy and you've always felt held back by your past. Jesus suffered with you, died for you, and would come to you this resurrection day and say, let's start again. But how can we make a fresh start? Let Jesus shape your past. He has dealt with it at the cross. Let Jesus shape your present. He calls you to follow him, to love and forgive the world with the grace he generously pours into your heart. Let Jesus shape your future. Trust in him. Let him decide where you go as you let him lead you into fullness of life, a life eternal. You are fully known, fully loved, and if you choose Jesus, you can live fully free, growing in his hope and love day by day. That is what the empty grave means, now and always.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. And there's not a place your mercy and grace
Living God, enable us this day,
pilgrims and companions,
committed to the way of Christ,
faithful to the call of Christ,
discerning the mind of Christ,
offering the welcome of Christ,
growing in the likeness of Christ,
engaging in the mission of Christ.
in the world that belongs to Christ.
Amen.